All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, a.k.a. ToeTagginTambo, back for the review show. Week 15 DFS, going to break things all down from the Sunday slate. Look at the $20 Millie Maker. Look at the perfect lineup. Check out the Wildcat this week in the 333. Shout out to all these winners. Go through it there. Got my guy Nades with me as always. Want to remind everyone very quickly off the top, this show is brought to you and presented by LineStar. If you haven't yet done so on the season, you can go over to linestarapp.com. Use the promo code SHIPIT. You can check it out. There's all kinds of sports over there they cover. We'll bring it up here in a second. But also want to remind everyone very quickly before I bring Nades in, this will be our last review show of the season. We've mentioned it the last couple of weeks. We're here. It sucks. It's the way it goes. But with the way this year is, there's Christmas next Monday. The New Year's Day is the week after. And then you get sort of to the end of the season anyway. And then PGA is coming back and all that. So it's been a fun season breaking this all down. Nades, happy to be here with you. We made it. Got through to the final review show of the season. We're going to go through. There's some good ones. And I think yesterday is a really good day to review because a lot of sharper players made their way to the top. So how did they see the slate differently than myself, yourself, others, things like that? We can always dive in and have a look. How you doing, my friend? What's going on this fine Monday morning?
Yeah, fine Monday, busy Monday as always. Obviously, we got everything going on. All these sports throw everything together on the same day. But hey, that's good for us as content providers and good for the community here. But overall, Sunday was fun. Packers, man, I'm just beating my head against the wall. These guys just lost back-to-back must-win games here. It is a rebuilding year, whatever you want to say, right? But man, Jordan Love looked promising for us. I know you were on the same Love stack I was on. Obviously, our tools will showcase those a little bit. They were on the Love stack. He did pick up more of that. Stack picked up more ownership than anticipated, but obviously Tampa past funnel, right? Green Bay at home. Everyone says Love sucks, but he's got multiple 20-point performances. I mean, he's got like one game under 15 DraftKings points all season, and he's never priced over like 6,200. So people can say what they want about Love. I'm excited. I think he's going to be solid. Obviously, he's a rookie, right? First kind of go at it, right? So definitely excited for that. But yeah, not the greatest week for me. Hopefully, get it back tonight. Obviously, the week 15 is not over yet. So if you didn't have the greatest week like myself, we can win it back tonight. And it only takes one, right?
Yeah, the Love thing is so crazy because remember we had it yesterday in the show. People were saying, I know everyone's hard on everybody. I was at a Christmas event yesterday with family, and it was fun and all that. But like everyone there is talking about every quarterback gets nitpicked down to something. Oh, he's not good enough at this, or he's overrated at that, or whatever it might be. All we talk about and care about is in relation to daily fantasy sports. We have other conversations amongst our community and as friends and with families and things like that about actual skill level and talent. My never Mahomes thing. Again, never Mahomes. If you did stack him up yesterday, he didn't show up anywhere again, but you would have needed him with CEH and McKinnon lineups. So even if you built 1,000, you didn't land on those lineups. That's my point about that one. But as a quarterback, best in the league probably, right? You go back on these debates. With Love, he has 9 games on the season out of 15 weeks where he scored over 18 DraftKings points. 6 of them of those 9 are over 20, and 5 of them are over 22. Like when you're getting a guy at 6K every week, give or take, that to me is what it's all about. That's what we're trying to dive into and find out. And that's why it's not about the point total on the game all the time and all these other things that we always have harped on all season long. I know we're getting to an end here, the last show, but just to break it all down. And then shout out to Sean, shout out to everybody here, Tweezy, Justin, Nick, Rance, all you guys that always stop by and are here for either first in or joining us each and every week. But hope it comes back next season. I posted it up, but this show will always be back. This is a staple for us. Obviously, it's exactly what we focus on and talk about all the time with process over just picks and plays, trying to get better and dig in and work on our own games. We're all trying to get to the same spot, get better together. That's what this community at SHIPIT Nation is all about. If you guys do want to get in, one code that still stands behind, if you guys want to get over to SHIPIT Nation and get in right now with NBA, NHL, PGA is just around the corner. Actually, if you sign up for a month right now, it will include some PGA. There's 2 events coming up at the start of January, and that's when the season kicks off. There's an event every week after that. I'm saying you get 2 events included within this, but you can use the code Mayo. It gets you 10% off over at shipitnation.com. Nades, I'm going to bring it up and have a look. Nick says here, McLaurin finally paid his tab. McCaffrey didn't completely break the slate. I would say McCaffrey broke the slate. He scored almost 50 points. So again, at 93, like 30 plus, but 44.7 gets the job done. I think my exact words in the slate plan were, we've been happy to take him at this price for his floor of 18 to 22, but there's going to be another week coming up soon where he gets you that 35 plus, and it's going to be needed. In this case, it was this week, 44.7. James Cook, we talked about the last couple of weeks. We'll bring him up. I got some other interesting things I'll bring up as well, but just the grand scheme overview for you, Nades. We did get the late news on Sunday as I go to screen share here about Tyreek Hill, right? That was kind of a big deal that we were, having to adapt too late. Everyone was getting the Tyreek Hill news. Do we go to, but Achane was in. Do we go to Mostert or Achane? Do we go to Waddle? Waddle ended up being like 3% in there. So where was your head at when you were coming off of this slate yesterday and some of the news we got late on how people adapted to it or did not?
Yeah. So the one thing that I know is, right, Demarcus Robinson coming in before that news hit was supposed to be, right, mega chalk. He did still obviously get there when we review some of these lineups, like the Millie Maker. He did find his way into the optimal there at 3,600. I didn't really like that play a ton with Tyler Higbee back, but a lot of people did jump off of him and go to other value plays, whether they moved to Wan'Dale Robinson, which likely some of it did. And then some of it moved to Cedric Wilson, obviously with that Tyreek Hill news, right? Cedric Wilson slotting in with no Tyreek Hill. The interesting point for me was Waddle's ownership didn't move at all. And obviously Waddle did his thing, his little penguin waddle into the end zone, right? Gave the little modified peace sign after he burned the dude down the sideline and just tiptoed his way to the end zone. There after getting hurt, everyone thought they were stone dead right away. Typical Waddle, goes out in the first quarter, comes back and just nukes. That was interesting. The Mostert thing was interesting as well, right? I still stayed with Mostert. I had some Mostert in one of my main teams and then one of the early only teams because I knew I didn't think they were going to have a trouble in this game at all winning this. They're not going to push Achane, right? They need Achane down the stretch here. Mostert's still a very capable running back. So I stuck with Mostert. Obviously, his ownership did come up a little bit with that Tyreek Hill news. He was projected like below 5%, got to about 8% almost in the Millie Maker. So really not a ton. 8% versus 3% really doesn't make a ton of difference. So just goes to show sometimes late news makes people jump off of the old or the value plays that everyone was kind of focusing on before that news. We see it in the NBA all the time, right? The shiny new toy, the shiny new value. Everyone jumps on that, but forgets about, hey, the good plays before that news are still good plays. Just because that news hit doesn't make those guys also not good plays anymore. So just late news obviously affects a lot of that stuff. And I guess the takeaway for me is it's not always the shiny new toy that you need to jump on, right? You have a process, you have a play, and those guys that you were looking at before, if they were good plays before that news, this is a totally different team, totally different scenario. It doesn't make those bad plays now just because something else opens up. So just being able to weigh that and just realizing that is something interesting because obviously it did shift ownership a decent amount across multiple different guys because Wan'Dale picked up a lot more ownership as well, I believe, because of that.
Yeah, and I think too, you brought up a really good point there at the end, especially because we talked about this a lot with the NBA education course. The NBA get a ton of late news, injury stuff, last minute scratches. I know everyone wants to complain. Obviously, the worst is when it's after lock, but I'm talking about even before lock. You just mentioned about the shiny new toy where everybody jumps to something. Remember, it's almost like we say with the projections. Sometimes when you see the highest projection and you say like, I'm going to trust it. Sometimes you're going to trust that means this. So I'm going to do that and play against it. And the situation you just said is a fine one. There was other good plays that didn't actually get worse. They just became less owned now because people were jumping ship over to a different play. So sometimes you got to remember about those. And then again, that's why I always talk about when people bring up, 1v1s and 2v2s and stuff like that in the Discord, oftentimes trying to not, be direct and just push back and be an idiot about it, just to say like, I am trying to help people get better at the actual game. And that's what this is all about. And so my point is like, when you're comparing that, The answer is probably just go look at the projection, because if you always trust the projection, you can build that into your process so that you're not, sometimes projection, sometimes gut. But where the experience comes in and actually getting better at the game is saying, okay, I've got to make this decision based on this current build. If you're a single entry player, it's very easy because now you have one build. If you're a 3-max player, you're deciding within that build and what you're doing in your others. And if it's an MME and it's through your player pool, you should have rules and things set up anyway to help force these situations into lineups where they would make sense. So certain cheap tight ends might only make sense. Like Cade Otton yesterday, not of his result, saying the way I might play him is with Baker Mayfield stacks or with Love stacks. I'm not really feeling the one-off as much, but maybe he's at least, even if he's in a secondary stack, with Jaden Reed as a way to pull some of that ownership away, and they're both cheap enough that you could make it work. But the long story to get to is that when you have these things that you're looking at, you do want to kind of consider your overall roster construction, and does it make sense within your build? Is there any correlation that you can find with it? Is there a leverage situation that you can find within it where you don't have this spot covered by a popular play, but this guy would be, an Ayuk instead of a CMC? Obviously, it didn't work out, but the point would be if you're going off of CMC and you happen to land on Ayuk, that can eat the lunch of all those CMC lineups that are out there if it works out. So just a little note on that. We'll talk about the Jets D. Definitely hurt some people. I still think fine at price. We'll get to it. I know we talk about this. Like, again, the Ds have not been getting out of hand or out of control. We'll see how some other players handled it. But when you also are down Tyreek, it's one thing. The other note that we talked about on the show yesterday that wasn't added thought, and I'll talk about when I get to Waddle, was that they did get their O-line pretty healthy, regardless of, outside of the fact they lost their center for the season last week in Williams. So just a note on that. And then there was one more here I saw too I wanted to bring up just because somebody mentioned it here. Where did it go? Brandon, it's a hell of a year, boys. Can't wait for golf. Golf is going to be awesome. We got some more news coming on that, but we just, obviously last year we've got partnerships now with DGen75, doing shows with Andy Lack. We've got Lee Aldrich, formerly from Fanshare, doing stuff with the course fit rankings. And over there, it's just been an awesome swing season. Anybody that's been playing it during some of these down events with those course fit rankings and the value report, and now the tier rankings, having Lee in there also. Some of the shows you guys have liked that I've done with DGen, now bringing it over to golf. There's going to be a lot going on with PGA. But just back to this note and the other one, like Nades, you and I have been doing this show all season. You were watching this show and being a part of it seasons before on other sites and things like that. This show is like our least watched, viewed inning. It has nothing to do with that, just so people know. We will never take this show away based on that. It's actually more important. It's a piece of my process that I use every week. I learn a lot from doing this show every single week and diving in and just getting those things top of mind that really do help me week in, week out. So I don't care if one person watches or hundreds, thousands, whatever end up watching it. It's my favorite show to do because it actually helps me see the slate. I do morning prep to my own stuff coming into this show so I can have ideas for it. And it's going to be awesome. We're going to continue to have this show year in, year out for NFL. For golf, I think golf, I've talked about this in the past, it's better applied on like Wednesday night when Andy and I do the show on how to apply the knowledge for the slate versus reverse engineering it, because that's just a result of an individual sport for what happened. I find we get a lot more out of this show with NFL. It's going to be an awesome setup here. Nades, I got the perfect lineup up, man. So it was brought up from Sean. No Rams in the perfect lineup is surprising. And just a note before I let you run on this, 269. The actual winner of the $20 was 233 this week. So pretty close. I mean, 30 points off, give or take, and change. But still, give me your thoughts on this perfect lineup here with what we've got.
Yeah, the no Rams piece is when you got the two high scoring Rams, 7,800, 7,500, right? And you look at the perfect lineup, you got guys like James Cook, 6,300, go off for 40, right? You got Godwin at sub 6K, go off for almost 30, right? Noah Brown, that's the reason, right? Because then it allowed you to throw a defense that's 4K. So that's the reason behind that. Obviously McCaffrey, I don't know how much more he needs to do to break a slate. I consider that breaking a slate when he goes off for 45 DraftKings points at 40% ownership. Obviously I leveraged it with the Ayuk, didn't work out, but that's not results oriented, right? Just like you brought up, Tambo, there's different ways to leverage things. And I did have tons of McCaffrey, but in lineups I didn't play McCaffrey, I would still look to leverage it because I knew the ownership coming in. the Baker, Godwin, you brought up the Godwin, right? Everyone jumped on kind of Mike Evans and Rachaad White were the two people everyone wanted to go to on Tampa, right? With no Jair Alexander. Obviously, Green Bay struggles a lot against running backs. Rachaad White is basically an every down back for Tampa, gets a ton of work out of the backfield, catches passes, gets all the line share of the carries. So obviously he was a great play. But the Chris Godwin came in at 1% ownership, I believe. We'll review him. I think once we get to the Wildcat, or some other tournaments, I see some people did go to Godwin. 1% for Godwin. You brought it up on the show on Mayo Media Network on Sunday morning. You said, hey, Godwin's been getting more involved. He looked good last week. He's sub 6K now, which used to be a slam dunk play, right? I mean, people used to see Chris Godwin sub 6K and he'd be 40% owned, right? 1% ownership for that. Obviously, the Noah Brown came back there in that offense. I mean, Scary Terry doesn't get there for 15 weeks or 14 weeks in a row. Finally, week 15 gets there. So overall, I mean, apparently David Njoku's prime Travis Kelce right now with Flacco under center. So that's another talking point. I mean, this build doesn't make a ton of sense outside of the Baker, Chris Godwin as leverage on the other side of the Jordan Love game, right? Obviously, Jordan Love didn't come in super chalky compared to guys in his range, right? Like Matthew Stafford. But he did get to almost 10% in the Millie Maker. So he got up there. Baker Mayfield on the flip side of that, 1% ownership in a matchup where you expect them to be passing a lot, right? Because I thought Green Bay was going to win the game at home. Not a biased take. It's just playing at home, Tampa, traveling on the road, cold weather, everything like that. So the James Cook play does make sense, right? With the new offensive coordinator there. He's been heavily involved. I don't know what happened before he came in there, who was in there before that didn't see this, but obviously James Cook's the guy there for Buffalo. It took them a couple weeks to realize that, and he's nuked every time since then. But the Hunter Henry, Njoku, Dolphins defense, things like that. Obviously, this is just the perfect lineup. And when the perfect lineup's 30 to 40 points higher than the Millie Maker, some crazy stuff happens.
Yeah, a little less correlation stuff to get to. I'll break it down a little further. We want to shout out, OMG Lyles in here with us. Ross, always back. Appreciate you. Trevor Bryan in the building. And, of course, my guy Jerry Matt, always working on his stuff, his process. Appreciate you sharing. Last week showed me some stuff he does for his own process. So love to see that. All you guys in here with us. A couple notes. You mentioned, some things that you could take away for sure. Again, not getting to this myself, but like someone said it here, Ross had it. The pay up defense got there for sure. But also don't forget, what was this? Opposite the Jets D. So everyone's playing the Jets D, the opposite, more expensive D. Everyone's playing Pop Douglas, Hunter Henry. And yes, shout out to Hoopster, who had another good call. Hunter at the tight end. He's the tight end whisperer. He had the Hunter Henry call. That one made sense from Pop Douglas. This made sense opposite of, so like a leverage play completely, the opposite side of the Jets. And Njoku just doing his thing a little bit more lately is whatever. McLaurin playing that every week. I mean, this is a perfect lineup, so he'll show up here. I'm sure you'll see it, but the reason was a lot of people were on Stafford, so you were going to get more ownership to McLaurin yesterday because of that. Noah Brown, only 5K, missing a ton of dudes. Made sense. I like Rachaad White here, but there was other good running back plays, so I can see getting where you couldn't get up to a $7,500 Evans and then Chris Godwin. And yeah, here's your next version of it, right? It wasn't Gabe Davis Day the last couple of weeks. It'll be next week after Terry McLaurin has his resurgence. It'll be the Gabe Davis season next week or whatever. But James Cook, did not expect this high of an output. I obviously was on this the week before. It's not just the new coaching staff, but also, that's what everyone's going to lean on. But like I said, when you have Dawson Knox back, 2 in the mix, and being able to block a little bit more, we had that call the week before. It just kind of carried over. McCaffrey, smash spot. And then Baker, the interesting part of this is how much we love the Green Bay side. It was the opposite side. So if we thought Jordan Love was going to push the needle and make something happen, then obviously you would think Baker would be at least somewhat involved in that. Again, not expecting 33s with 28s and other scores there, but just to note again where it could be. Godwin had been talked about by the coaching staff the week before and ended up getting 11 targets that week, had himself another good day yesterday. So there is some takeaways. Let's move it over, Nades. Let's go to this $20 Millie Maker winner here, and I'll try and blow it up the best I can. That might be it might be this one here. I think Haffy, Driver's Seat, and Ski Bash are all 150 max. You could check it on your end, but it's definitely a day that was a sharper. I mean, these guys are all top players here that we're looking at. So just to bring it up, but Happy Junior 5 got the job done. It was tight yesterday up there. Look at the swing here, 232.64, 233.24. I mean, you're not sending congratulations. You're sweating and accepting them, I should say, if you're happy. You're sweating those stat corrections, telling everybody to chill out probably and just give me a second here. Let me see what happens, because crushing third place by almost 10 points, but very close between two sharp players here. And their lineups were somewhat similar, but James Cook. So here we go. We got Baker, Rachaad White, Jaden Reed. Talked about yesterday Jaden Reed. I know he got injured and stuff, and he didn't even crush the price tag at 4,900. But the point would be, people, the chalk got there. 35% and 40 did. But with 1% Baker, 15% Rachaad White, which is way less than these other spots, and a bunch of other 4% plays and 5% plays, you leave this guy open at this price tag. I mean, these are good lineups here. These are set up well. So talk to me about this one, Nades. Baker with Rachaad White and Reed, Noah Brown, Christian McCaffrey. What else is in here? Njoku, Demarcus Robinson, the Cleveland D, and James Cook as a way to get a piece of that big total in Buffalo, Dallas. I mean, that one, complete whiff. I would say, for the majority, I talked a little bit about him. I know Hoop had a good point that brought up, but didn't bring him to James Cook. But talk to me about this lineup in general, and then I'll go through it a little bit more.
Yeah, so the Baker, Rachaad White, I think that's fine. I mean, it's one way to get unique, right? When you're using Rachaad White, because like I said, he is heavily involved in the pass game. Green Bay struggles with running backs out of the backfield, and he can get you there on the ground too. Baker is just a price play, right? 5,700 on the opposite side of the Jordan Love, 10% ownership, but also cheaper. $500 cheaper or $300 cheaper, than Matthew Stafford, who came in at almost 30% ownership, which everyone knew about, right? So going a little bit cheaper there. You just grab the value piece from that Rams game. Don't go to Kyron Williams chalk. You don't go to Cooper Kupp chalk. You don't go to Matthew Stafford chalk. You just grab the value play, right? And then you attack different games, right? You attack the Green Bay Tampa game. You play the best play there on the slate in terms of running back and Christian McCaffrey. The Noah Brown is a price and opportunity standpoint, right? Tank Dell's out, Nico Collins out, Noah Brown's still there in a game against the pass funnel in Tennessee, right? Noah Brown makes sense. Obviously, the Jaden Reed play way too underpriced there in that game environment. So overall, it makes sense. I think the tight end defense correlation, I mean, we start seeing that a lot. I mean, we've seen this a couple times this year, right, Tambo, reviewing this. Everyone looks at running back defense correlation. We've seen tight end defense. I don't know if there's correlation or what, but we've seen this come up a lot in these winning lineups is tight end and the defense. You just kind of pair those two together, right? The Njoku and the Cleveland defense I thought was interesting there. Overall, great build. And it was very sharp to go. I was trying to look at his exposures to see how much Baker he had here, because the Baker play I think was really sharp. So he had 19, almost 20% Jordan Love, and then he had 3% Baker. So that just shows, right? You don't have to have 20% of everyone, and you don't have to completely fade everyone, right? There's no lock button or fade. Nobody can just play some of everyone or whatnot. So I do think it was interesting that it's pretty unique seeing the 3% ownership exposure in terms of your 150 max get to the top. But hey, that's all it takes.
You need some fortunate runouts. Like, look, too, James Cook only 8%, underweight on McCaffrey by 12%. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of stuff here where you got to get a lot right and have it fall into place, but pretty heavily overweight on Noah Brown, which did end up showing up in there as well. Overweight by almost 10% on Demarcus Robinson, who ended up falling in there as well. Overweight on Njoku, which was in the mix up there. And then way overweight on the Cleveland D as well, which showed up in there. So, I mean, some of the spots make sense and hit. Other spots is just part of your portfolio. Remember, too, this is not a single entry lineup or something that we're reviewing. This is in a 150 set. So to Nade's point and everything that made sense with it is like, then you see some other stuff. Like, okay, Robinson can easily get there on his own. He's just 3,600. He doesn't need to do a ton. He could just fall into place, make the rest work. But you're kind of betting on, in this particular build within this full set, that Kupp, Nakua, and Kieran Williams all at over 7K yeah, they could have good games, but as long as they don't have games that are needed or are optimal, you could still get away with this. A lot of people are playing Jaden Reed, but how many are playing it with Baker Mayfield, let alone, I mean, he's only 1%, let alone Baker Mayfield not stacked with a pass catcher and being stacked with his running back, something like that. That stuff is what allows you to get away with a play like McCaffrey, who even when he was underweight, you're going to, once you have these guys in a lineup together, you've got the money to spend. He's going to be the best spend. And then I like your point on this. It brought up the Cleveland and Njoku thing. I kind of wonder, like, twofold. Again, this is not backed by any data, just in my head, the way I've always thought about it is like you can get a pick in short yardage situations, and then who are they going to use in that? If it's not the running back, it's typically passing to a big tight end that can find himself in open space. When the defense is doing something and scoring points and they're up, they've got pick sixes. Usually they're going to be up in the game. That means they're going to be running the ball a lot, which is where that correlation comes from. But on all of those situations, you end up in a spot where it's, okay, now I got to pass on third down. What's the easy way to get a first down? Your big tight end over the middle. Again, reaching a little bit, but the idea behind it, if you land on it, just thinking of concepts that can at least make sense, I'm okay with it. And I've actually seen it work out more times than not. And it is on certain teams the way they do business. Kansas City, a lot of time goes, again, outside of this week, talking normal situation. I'm just going to give an example, like Pacheco, third down, let's go to our guy Kelsey. You see it on other teams with the Ravens. Run with three different running backs. RIP to my guy Keaton Mitchell last night. Sucks to see that season go down for him, to a season at least, I should say. Not like that, but just in general. Sucks to see an injury like season ending. Who knows? It looked pretty bad. So hopefully he can get healthy quick. But, same thing. And then likely on the end. So the defense can put you in those positions. So I don't hate this thing. But the reason I brought up James Cook whiff earlier, it was in our chat all day yesterday. Hoop said it. Other people said it. They think Dallas is going to get crushed here. Buffalo is going to show up. Dallas is going to put up a stinker. Buffalo is going to get the job done at home. Yet nobody played Buffalo and Dallas pieces. You just couldn't get to them. They were too expensive or they didn't make sense. Funny enough, the congrats to IMPGM, won the DraftKings Live final yesterday, had a Michael Gallup random one-off play in the lineup who did nothing, by the way, just still ended up in the lineup and still got the job done with a score of like 212 or something. But back to James Cook, this was like the perfect spot to pop in a James Cook play. This slate, it was a 50-point total. The total didn't move based on weather. We said Buffalo's going to slam them. We just talked about James Cook the week before, and it didn't even feel like chasing. The scenario was still very similar, just there was other good running back plays in this price range. And so realistically, it's just a miss. And everyone will say, well, it's results oriented because he got 39. No. Like he could have got you 22 and it still would have been awesome at that price and the way this slate was setting up. So I'm just saying the idea of all the talking points, content, etc., going towards this concept and then not getting to James Cook beyond 4.5% for the field. This was a perfect way to get a piece of it and to coincide with them being the favorite at home. In their state, everything's set up well for him, I think. So do you have any other thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I have more thoughts on that too. So it's in the flex position. Who's another running back? Similar price, right? 5,800, Ezekiel Elliott, right? Projected 30+% owned, came at 27% ownership. He could have easily played Zeke there and left the money on the table. He could have easily played Rashee Rice there, who was obviously a pretty chalky wide receiver, came in at almost 15% at 6,100 in that Chiefs game. He could have played him there. Obviously, Rashee Rice still did decent, right? 24 points. But Zeke, he plays Zeke there. He doesn't win the millie, right? So there's just different things like that you don't – I mean, if you have chalk, you don't need to smash all these other plays. And everyone said, yeah, Buffalo's going to smash Dallas. Dallas is bad on the road. They're going to struggle going into Buffalo. Okay, if they're smashing them, you think it's because Buffalo's going up there and lighting up with 5 passing touchdowns, right? I mean, James Cook is heavily involved in the offense. That makes sense. I was on the Buffalo defense a little bit because I knew the Jets defense was going to get chalk, $100 cheaper. I didn't like Dallas in that game at all, so I like Buffalo. But to your point, right, Josh Allen was expensive. Stephon Diggs was expensive. Dawson Knox is back, so him and Kincaid are there, right? You got the Gabe Davis, you got the Shakir, you got all those other – why not just play James Cook, right? So I thought that was a very sharp move. And another interesting take here is I was looking at his portfolio. He didn't have one player over 25% ownership in his entire pool. So I don't know if he put a hard cap on everyone, like a global max exposure. because 24.7% is his highest owned player. So that's another interesting. I don't know if you have any points to add on that for the people, because
I'll go there
obviously
next.
you do a lot
Yeah,
more.
I like that last call though, so I was just gonna bring it up though. Like, yeah, you got inverted numbers here, right? In the sense of 26% of the fields on Zeke, he gets you 9.6, only 4%, 39. I mean, inverted the other way, like worse off. So you could have had much better opportunities here. My guy James Conner, I tried to make that work. It could have just been James Cook, but he had a touchdown early, and I thought he would be a little bit more involved. Still got 18. I mean, that's pretty good on the day. I think that was a lot of points. Like, you look here, yeah, James Conner was right up in the mix, but in reality, the other guys that came through were what you expected. I mean, these two chalk plays just worked out so well at their prices, and this was complete misprice on the slate, the way things have been going. So we understand why everybody got there. You could argue the misprice on this. We knew we needed 30 plus, but you've been getting a floor of like 20 to 25. And then, like we said, we were just waiting for that breakout game. Huge favorites on the road, in a dome, all these other factors that we thought we would see, like Rachaad White. He ended up coming through getting 21, but I mean, had some ownership there as well. So let's go back here. Let's have a look at his exposures. We'll go by position real quick and just see. So we talked about quarterback already. Don't need to go back to that. But like you said, hard cap, 19. Kind of like this, though. Like, I don't care about these little ones trickling in. Wasted 6% on Mahomes like everybody does. Like, just horrible playing Mahomes always, but that's fine. We'll stick with that. But people will eventually learn, right? They'll be waiting around for what do people do with Jordan Spieth? I think they tried him for 2 years, and then it took 2.5 years or 3 years to get paid off when he started getting good again. So if you avoided all that, sometimes you just have to put a stop to it. It's really hard to get Mahomes right, and that's the continuous piece that I'll always make fun of on here. Looks like a hard cap, which makes sense now that I was like, oh, he went way underweight on him, but it really looks just like he capped. He just got a bunch of running backs. And just so people notice this, I don't have any problem with this strategy. These are obviously great MME players, but just in general, you end up underweight on McCaffrey. But again, almost like when we look at the Run the Sim segment on those showdown shows, like, oh, look, he's bad leverage now. He's minus 10% or whatever. But yeah, he's still showing up in X amount percentage of lineups that are simulating out that look good. In this case, my point is you're still getting them in a quarter of your lineups. You still have 25% almost on Christian McCaffrey. You're still in good shape. But what this negative percent allows you to do is get overweight White, overweight Ford. Don't be results oriented. Overweight Singletary, who, if you wanted to be, did really well. Overweight on Barkley, overweight on CEH, overweight on Mostert. Like, you still get a bunch of spots. Again, you talked about it. I've made fun of it all season. Everyone seemingly has a all-in or fade button. It's not how this game works, and you'll see it more when we get to some sharper players after this as well. We're already looking at them now, but just some of the other spots we'll look at. Cooper Kupp, you said it, 25. It looks like a hard cap, but well, underweight on Jaden Reed, you still have 25% of your lineups almost linked towards Jaden Reed, but now you're over on Hopkins, Douglas, Noah Brown, Robinson, Dobbs, Hyatt, Stephon Diggs, even. Like, again, not all these guys got there. It's what it does for your portfolio. And then tight end, got to the cap on McBride, which was overweight there. I like that. Little bit overweight on Tucker Kraft, a little bit overweight on Njoku. Tight end plays kind of got there yesterday. They were the good spots to go to, so that's fine. And then Detroit defense will note, not Detroit, defense will note, it looks like, where are we at here? No defense over 10%. Just turned them all off and got there that way. So, you know, that's something you can do. Somebody brought that up yesterday, actually, too. Again, you don't have to do it, and I know not everybody does, but just to see it. Let's look at some of these other ones. I know driver's seat, another good player. Let's see here. What did they have for exposures? So the field, underweight on the chalk defense. Ski Basher, underweight on the chalk defense. And then 20% on the Rams defense, still at 12. But like, you're still getting over on these other spots. I mean, I don't see too much different here with that. Anything else you want to talk about there, Nades? If not, let's go to the Wildcat. Talk about my guy, Anil Prow, 88. Awesome dude, awesome player. And shipped the Wildcat yesterday. Do you have anything more on the $20 that you want to talk about, though? No,
the only other thing with the dude that won it, right? Hard cap, 25%, it seems like, on everyone, but that's still 25% of 150 is 36 lineups, right? That's more than some people put into the contest alone, right? So when you're playing these guys, right, you still have 36 lineups with Christian McCaffrey, right? That's more than majority of the field is entering in there, right? Majority of the people are entering 20 or less, right? Obviously, you got your 150 maxers. So, like, you still have outs to the top. And then the Jordan Love and Baker Mayfield, if Jordan Love's your highest owned quarterback, why not go on the other side of with a small percentage of your lineups just in case the game script flips? So that's the only other point that I wanted to bring up. If you're already in on that game on one side, it makes sense to go in on the game from the other side, from the other quarterback as well.
Yeah, it could be the first week some are watching, even though it's our last week for this show. But just to know, you said it there. I mean, we talk about this all the time. College football, and even this season, they introduced these super flex for whatever. But like that's why you're always putting two quarterbacks for the most part, or quarterbacks against each other, because that's actually the highest correlation in football. But you don't get to use it because when we play Classic Slate, you can only pick one. But to your point, it's funny because what did everybody do yesterday? Like, oh, I'm going to play Hal, the sneaky opposite side. He was half the ownership of Stafford, or maybe a little bit over that, but still, the point was, why did Love still got Love? Why didn't everyone jump to the other side? It was like 1/10 of him on the other side on Baker Mayfield, but you love the Jordan Love side. So sounds weird to say it, but you get what my point is, what Nades' point just was. So I think that's kind of key to pick up on. And then, yeah, your point on the lineups thing, I've said this for years. I love that you just brought that one up. I think we've missed it all season, but people forget. They'll say, oh, that's crazy. They'll go around now and say, dude won the Millie with only 10% James Cook in his portfolio. Well, first of all, that was like double the field or more. Second of all, 10% of 150 is very obviously 15. Most people have 20 lineups or less, 10 to 20, maybe 5 lineups that they throw in that. He was as if you had 100% of those, or on your 20 max, they were 75% him on that. So it's like they're mixing into a portfolio. Doesn't mean don't play it if you can't play 150. To each their own on that. We've had plenty of conversations on that throughout the season. Some people have it on 50. My point about that is if you feel good about your 50, I do all the time, I'm fine with just playing that. To each their own. But other people are like, oh, got to use the max because they have the max. Well, yesterday, that's my point about the running joke about Never Mahomes. I could have ran 1,000 lineups yesterday with the lock button on Mahomes that said use at least 2 guys with him, and probably got 0 Mahomes, CEH, McKinnon's. Not that those were even needed anyway. It would have loaded me up with Rice. It would have loaded me up with Kelsey. It would have loaded me up with all this other stuff. And then none of them were even needed anyway. So sometimes it doesn't matter if you have 1,000 lineups or 50 or 10. But when these guys have a certain percentage of exposure to somebody, you are still getting a nice overweight position on the field, and overweight versus what the majority are doing anyway. So you actually are giving yourself outs on those James Cook lineups. You have 15 lineups that have him if he has that almost 40-point day. So keep that in mind when you're looking at it as well. Nades, I'll click it back to you. We got just a who's who up at the top. So I said it was definitely a day for the Sharps yesterday. Anil, maybe less known to some than Yoda, Chipotle, and Ricky D, Hardcore, Redcoat, BK, Grex, all these guys. Like a lot of these guys all these guys are incredible. I've met most of them. Grex, awesome dude, but definitely probably underrated. Just people don't know him as well. Crushes it in a bunch of sports. Really good guy. Neil, same thing. You should know him by now if you don't, but I know everybody knows these guys. So we'll get to some of these ones and round out the show on this tournament days. It'll take some time. But here's Anil's lineup. He got there with Flacco, Amari, Njoku, no run back. Popped in some pieces, okay? Kieran Williams and Terry McLaurin. Love that little secondary. Popped in Chuba Hubbard, Rashee Rice, Noah Brown, and that allowed him to get up to the pay up D opposite of the Jets chalk. Give me your thoughts on his lineup here. It's a pretty interesting one, and it, again, just snuck in the win. Another guy waiting on stat corrections versus destroying third place by 11 points. Go ahead.
Yeah, going in on the Cleveland offense at home against a pretty bad Bears defense, right? Bears defense been playing better as of late, but I mean, it's still Cleveland at home and the dog pound, right? Flacco came in, and I mean, this guy's been zipping the football the last 2 weeks, right? Obviously, they went in and beat Jacksonville, and now they beat Chicago here, and Flacco just looks like this guy looks like a Super Bowl champ, right? Flinging, and his connection with Njoku's off the charts right now. So obviously, Anil went in on that conviction, right, with the Cleveland offense. You don't need a run back because who are you going to play in Chicago, right? You got DJ Moore. Well, he's expensive. You don't know who else. Mooney, right? The running backs kind of trash there. So don't really need a run back, and a lot of people do force a run back. We've talked about that multiple times across this the show breakdowns the last 15 weeks. Is a lot of people in the optimizer, right? A lot of optimizers have it automatically built in, right? Where you click a button and it says automatically run every stack back with opposing pass catcher or running back, tight end. If you do that, obviously you don't get to a build like this. We already brought up the Noah Brown. I really like that secondary correlation with Kyren Williams and Terry McLaurin. Just grab the two best plays from that game, right, that are affordable. Terry McLaurin, flop leg from the whole season, right? 15%. I mean, he was projected to come in higher owned than that. Obviously, he got there. Kyren Williams just significantly mispriced there with his line share of the back. The Rashid Rice, right, wide receiver number 1 there. You can't afford to get up to Kelsey. Rashid Rice has been the guy for Kansas City's offense. People want to argue Justin Watson, things like that, but Rashid Rice continues to produce every week like that. And then he landed on Chuba Hubbard, but also the thing about Chuba Hubbard is people wanted to play Bijan, myself included. Bijan didn't come in super high owned or anything, but on the other side of that same game, right? We talk about that a lot. Other side of the same game, same running back, same quarterback, other side of the game, right? Just flipping the script. It's still a gross game, but it could be Chuba Hubbard at a cheaper price point. He is at home, right, against Atlanta. So overall, good build, and it allowed him to spend up at defense where on the other side of the Jets, where we already talked about, right? Jets came in at almost 20% ownership in the $20, and you flip the build because you got these other cheap pieces. So overall, great build.
Looking at his exposures too, like again, Stafford and Howell took up a huge majority of his lineups. Got overweight on Howell, opposite side. Brock Purdy, pretty straightforward up and down here. I liked all these options. Allen, I think my slate plan had Stafford, Purdy, Love, Allen, and maybe Case, like one more. I think I played Keenum at 4K just to try and make it work. I know some people had some Keenum with everything builds yesterday, but Keenum to Noah Brown, our guy Chris Nevs in the Discord, very generous guy, always giving away. He came 6th for 300K in the FFWC yesterday in Arizona, and I thought that was pretty interesting just because, again, if you were looking for a way to use Keenum and Noah Brown, put them together, sandwich that, and try and get around there that way, I thought that was another good spot. But again, heavy on Love, no Baker. And not that you needed him. He already won the tournament. I'm saying my point is, like, it's a lot of people did this yesterday because of the game environment. I know our guy Nick said, I thought this was going under. Our stack rankings loved the Love side. I keep doing this, but they were in love with Jordan Love. We'll say it that way. But either way, the game looked good. I know my core was Love, Reed, Kraft, with CMC and White, but I had 4 guys from that game going, and in my actual main build, it had Godwin in it as well to finish out the 5-man. So it's like I was all over that game. I had a good result. I think it was 176 that I scored with it. But my point is, the environment, the stack rankings have been all over it. It's in Lambeau. I get that side of it, but I thought there was, again, the pricing, even if it didn't get to the over, I'm not focusing on the game points. Like I've said all season, the fantasy point potential. So I was looking at it from that. Let's look what else does he have here. So very heavy on the big 4, really, to be honest, Nades. Look, we knew Kyren Williams. Again, he sets a cap very clearly of some kind because you're just not getting there. But yeah, McCaffrey, Gibson, Zeke Elliott, these 4 were by far the 4 most popular on the slate yesterday. It's right here. You can see it and very close behind. So not straying too far. And this probably is the product. Yeah, good point here by Jason. Our guy Bader Bear says Gibson 3rd highest owned. If he goes Gibson there instead of Hubbard, he doesn't get there. Nice pivot. But I would also imagine too, just bringing it up, and I'm not going to go back and forth right now. I know it off the top of my head, but just to note, remember his lineup had Kieran and McLaurin as the flex.
Secondary.
So you weren't going to likely get McLaurin and Gibson and Kieran. It can happen. I'm not saying it wouldn't. I'm just saying that's, maybe it's luck, maybe it's whatever. But for that lineup, I would imagine that's the case because also of his quarterback exposures on Stafford and Howell being so high, it was likely there was some sort of combination set up for that, where if you got to that many, it would end up with more of those guys in the lineup. Pretty straightforward here, too, for the situational stuff. The interesting note I would say, though, is that like Kupp, Robinson, and Nakua way down the list. Besides Nakua, you could say 17, but the other guys 10% or less on him having almost 20% of Stafford and a bunch more Howell. you're not really seeing it focused as much there, just kind of capped out to get nice chunks of each. Got a good little bit of leverage on Wilson, Lamb, situational stuff there, where, again, not that they came through, but more of just how he got there. Amari Cooper, what was his Flacco ownership, by the way, just going back? Very little. So that's funny too, right? You see that 3% on that. It's just the one that sneaks through. Sometimes that's all it takes. I showed that off and joked about it on my own stuff last week when people were I said, like, sometimes you think you're dead early in the day and there's one lineup that comes through later on. And so that's the way in Njoku, but same thing here, McBride, Kraft. I think he played it pretty straightforward and up and down when it comes to how his lineups were built, how his pool was built. It's the roster construction factor that comes into play. Where's he at here on the field? See, this was my point too. Like, you'll see it with some of these players. We're going to look at the other guys too. I don't want to spend all day on here, but like Jets D still took 10%, way under the field, not playing the chalkiest D, but matched the field or just above on Rams. Again, there is no all in or fade button. You can still get away with it and come through. Before I look at somebody else here and give you other thoughts on this one, Nate's our guy, Trevor, who shipped $500K last season in the showdown slate. That was a point he's bringing up back to our previous one on how many lineups to play. There's other factors involved. It needs to go your way, but his point he brings up is for showdown, and it can work on anything. But just to say it again, same thing. If your script is to run all 5 ones with running backs at the captains, it wouldn't matter if you have 1,000 lineups in showdown. You're not getting there. Play your scripts, hit the script right, and it can come through still. So if you feel comfortable with that, it can work out to your favor in the tune of $500K in his case. And then he also says Riverboat Ron plays DFS benching Hallen Gibson. Dick, yeah, he is obviously joking about that, but in general, the later we get in the season, you do have to remember some of this stuff. That's why it becomes a little bit more challenging, and you have to think outside the box a little bit later in the season, because people will sit guys down. There is more potential for tanking. There is more potential for seeing what somebody has and being able to get away with it, saying you double down. We're talking about double leveraging on the slates and in these tournaments. The coaches are saying, how can we, and the owners and things like that, how can we bench someone but make the storyline look like we're trying to see what this guy's got and give him a shot, try and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. The problem is sometimes it backfires, and whoever said player is that gets plugged in wants to prove that they have a reason to be out there, and they end up doing well for that. This was a point brought up earlier, two Nades, was Hunter Henry was obvious, only pass catcher, wasn't playing Douglas. Yeah, sometimes that is the case. And I used the example last season a lot, but last year we kept trying to make Greg Dortch work, and it ended up being Trey McBride. This week was the same thing. Pop Douglas got a bunch of late steam, and then all of a sudden it ends up being Hunter Henry. So any other thoughts from Anil's stuff here that you've got? If not, I want to look at some others.
No, I just think it's interesting. So if you look at the top 5 players, right, in terms of ROI, obviously all very, very good players, all had 100 lineups max enter in a 333. He had 36% max cap on his player pool. All the other 4 players all went like 65% or higher, right? So I think that is an interesting point, because we saw the Millie Maker winner, right, have a max cap exposure set too. So obviously, to each their own, right? There's multiple different ways to play, but he only still with 96 or with 36% max, he still only played 97 players. Whereas some of these guys that had 70% cap, 75%, 78%, still played 85, 81 players, things like that. So it's not sometimes going super narrow and taking stands. I know your kind of team build your portfolio and get you exposure. And it doesn't mean play everyone, but it means play everyone in a way that makes sense. I know that's kind of the camp you come from, and it seems like Anil is kind of in that same boat. And obviously it came to the tune of obviously a very, very good day for him.
Yeah, I like this setup, but the one thing I will say to your point is that I also don't mind, like, again, we're talking about the best players in the world, but my point is, like, these 68s aren't coming in on something ridiculous. I will show you something in a second that, again, a very sharp player, but I think it's still, like, for me, it's an aggressive strategy, but I understand it because I see something else now, so I'll note it. But where I'm going with this, so Anil, I love this approach. This is how I like to play. I like to still get pieces of angles. I think you're not dead just because you didn't have this, that, or the other. But obviously when you see like Yoda Cow and Chipotle, where they're doing it is on these top plays. Like, again, getting 68% Kieran when he's already 60, that's fine. This is awesome. This is my point, though. Everyone talks about this. The biggest leak I see out there, one of the biggest leaks. I call a lot of things leaks. I think this is one of the biggest ones, though. Man, 40% McCaffrey, I'm against that. He's not going to do it. I'm full fade. And then other people are like, oh, he's going to crush. I'm all in. You are allowed just to play the field on the guy and get enough exposure to him. You're not paying the. You really think Utica's paying the rake on the field? Like this gets said all the time. Oh, he's just matching the field. He's paying the rake. This man is definitely not paying the rake. I can promise you that, and you guys know this. So, again, stop worrying about whatever everyone else is telling you. I think a beginner rule for someone who's just starting off playing DFS, it's really good to think of these things where you have to make hard decisions. I do like it from that perspective. My friend, Degenerate75, preaches this all the time. I think it's really good advice, and a lot of people that he's talking to and people coming in, and ourselves included, are starting off just getting into DFS. I think it is good advice to try and take a stand on someone versus just playing the field. I think what we're doing here, and I know for myself and many others that are trying to get great at their game, are looking for what are the advanced players doing and trying to understand why. What I always say is you don't know. You're not going to go dissect every single one of his lineups, but you have no idea how he played this 42%. So my point is, I always say this, and stick with me on this when it gets tricky. It's worked better in golf to explain it. But if 40% of the field played McCaffrey and 50% of those lineups are playing it in a certain way that's negative EV, horrible, with all the other chalk plays, lineups that don't make sense, lineups that have no chance really on paper of winning this type of tournament, and he's matching the field, but every single one, 100% of his lineups are built in a way that's plus EV, very solid. I mean, literally, I think the best player in the world. So my point is about this, he's not actually matching the field. His percentage factually says he matched the field on ownership. He built way better lineups than the majority of the field. So he's actually overweight on good McCaffrey lineups. And that's where people miss. There's levels to it. His paper number says he matched the field. What he actually did dominated the field most likely, because of these 40%, there's probably 25 to 50% of them that are very bad lineups. He's got 42% that are probably very good lineups. So 100% of his McCaffrey lineups are built strong. He's actually way overweight on useful McCaffrey lineups. That's where people miss it and make a mistake. And that's why you can match the field on ownership. Hopefully that's a good one that you guys can take away. It works really well in golf. Oh, this guy's going to be 30%. I can't play him. No, you can play him as the field and play him differently. You can play him and take a stand on either side, or you can go to your default of fade or all in. But there's definitely something to think of when you talk about this. I was going to say my guy Grex, who is actually hilarious. When I was at the Fantasy Golf World Championship with him and his wife there, this man had one of every drink amongst the meal. He had like an espresso martini to start, tried whatever the drink of special was with like a bourbon. This was in New Orleans. I think it was in New Orleans. Maybe it was in a different event, but anyway, Memphis, sorry, for last year's Fantasy Golf World Championship. Then he had a dessert one. He had wine with the steak. I mean, this guy tried every drink there. He's an incredible dude, hilarious guy. But I was like, man, he went 40%. I know he was heavy on this game, but he went 40% on Wicks. But then I realized he was also one of the guys that didn't max that still ended up outputting a very nice ROI. So congrats to Grex, my guy. I just was wondering, I was like, man, this is an aggressive approach. If it was on 100 lineups, I would think, 40% on 4 is too much. On 10 lineups, I'm fine with it. He's building around those stacks. And if you go to where he was at here, it was pretty balanced. Pick your 5 quarterbacks, run it. I might have to hit him up and tell him about this Never Mahomes thing still. But anybody else you want to look at here, Nades? I know you brought up looking at
no, so Ricky D. Yeah, Ricky D, obviously another very, very incredible player. We talked about him multiple times this year already on these shows. Look at his running back exposures, right? He had 60% cap exposure on the good plays, right? McCaffrey, he matched the field or thought he was matching the field, right? He went 36% McCaffrey, to your point that you just made, right? Kyron Williams, he knew this stake in this field. Kyron Williams is going to be even higher owned than in the Millie Maker. Came in at 60%. What'd he do? He matched the field. He probably thought he was going to be slightly overweight, but still, the point still stands. And that allowed him to, he thought obviously Zeke, he knew Zeke was going to be coming chalky. He probably thought about 30%. So let me go double weight or double or double the field, right, in terms of Zeke, because I'm matching the field on the two other chalk running backs, McCaffrey, Kyron Williams. So to your point, Tambo, just another obviously incredible player. You don't need to lock or fade these guys. You can match the field at other good plays, and it allows you to get overweight on guys like Trey McBride, Zeke Elliott. Don't be results oriented, right? Go overweight on those guys. Get overweight, right? He had 34% Chuba Hubbard on the other side of that Bijan game that we already talked about. So just another point to bring up that I think it's interesting. And this is why the show's so beneficial for me, so beneficial for you, and hopefully you guys in the chat. Obviously, we use Fantasy Labs. We're not partnered with them or anything, but we just like the way that you can look at everything on here. And I highly suggest y'all go through this. You can click into any contest, look at any player, filter by username, search, look at their exposures, look at the lineups, and see everything, and then go back into whatever optimizer partner you use. We use the solver over here, and you can go back into the rewind feature and rerun lineups and play around with it and see to redo your exposure portfolio and then see what they would have came out with and things like that, just to play around. Because if you don't create a process, you have nothing to go off of, and you're kind of just throwing darts at the wall every single week, which definitely is not going to be profitable in the long run.
Yeah, my man Ricky D could have won this thing too. If he had just got rid of the 14% Mahomes, it would have been all over, man. He would have got all that spaced out to the other good spots here. He would have crushed. But yeah, you said it. And I guess this play, the Hubbard one really sticks out because that's just a huge overweight stance. So something he had there on him. I like, the late news on, people coming around on Jones. Again, not results. I'm looking at portfolios and what they got to. I definitely think Pollard, no one was on him. Could have been the opposite side in James Cook. So the same idea, this just doesn't always work out, right? Same idea, though, was how do I get a piece of that game that nobody else is going to? The answer was James Cook, but I like the thought process of Tony Pollard. You see it here. Rice, Douglas, Wandale, all these just around field or above. Overweight on Rice, overweight on Zeke. Probably a lot of secondary stacks focusing on that as ways to get that you can use the good plays, but put them together and correlate. But Pop Douglas fits in with that. Wandale, fine. But then you go down here and it's like Marquise Brown. Not many people get into that one. Elijah Moore. Not many people going there. DJ Moore. Not many people ended up going there. Amari. So lots of good stuff within the mix that you still get in. Flacco, 2%. He's got 12. Fields, 2%. Got 14. That's how you get to those more double more plays. The Elijah Moores and the DJ Moores and the Elijah Moores. And then go to tight end, way over on McBride, taking the stand. I guess the only thing I can say about this, I don't love it because I thought we had a million tight ends yesterday anyway, but there is something to be said for flipping the build when everyone's on a cheap tight end. That lands you on a one Travis Kelce, which in turn, if Travis Kelce has a big game, it's likely linked to Mahomes. I get that side of it. I just don't personally love playing a guy that I just don't believe in, and in DFS at least. And also, I thought the tight end was loaded, and there's been like no need, and it was. Pretty much everybody smacked Travis Kelce in the face. But, Taylor Swift was at the game. He's going to do good, right? No, it has nothing to do with that shit either. So that's just one thing. Again, Chalk D to round it out. Underweight on the Jets. But again, don't play Chalk D. Well, why? But then overweight on the Rams. Like, it can still go both ways. Overweight on Buffalo. Kind of, again, I really like Ricky D the way he's picking his spots. Good overweight, good with it, underweight. Go back here.
Go back to his running back quick.
I will. Just wait. Overweight, around the field, underweight. Opposite of what I was trying to say. Go back to here. Same thing. Picked his stand, way overweight on Rice, got overweight on some others, and then matched the field on some others. And then to your running back point, match the field on the biggest number, but way overweight on Zeke. Match the field on McCaffrey, and then you get some underweight stances down here.
Yeah, I have another point to add too, right, to the Chuba Hubbard. So who's Chuba sandwiched between, right? Zeke and Gibson. Obviously, Zeke and Gibson, the two chalk pieces. Chuba, obviously low owned. He knew he was overweight on Zeke, right? Double the field. He was underweight on Gibson. So he went with the leverage play, going overweight on the guy in the similar price point in between those. Which I thought was obviously a sharp move. And Chuba got 23 carries and 25 carries the 2 weeks before that in two games that they got absolutely annihilated. So even in this game where obviously it was a gross total, but every game in that AM window was a gross total, right? Grabbing the guy that's still getting the work, right? Getting the snap share, getting the carries, and also leveraging the field because he knows he's underweight on Gibson, right? Going with the guy in the middle there at 5,600. I did want to bring that up as well.
Yeah, I love that call. And the last thing I would say too, and it will probably trickle over to golf when for the PGA DFS season, is I did a lot of thinking over the last year, this season with NFL DFS and things like that too, about some of these like 1%ers trickling in and stuff. Like you see like, oh, you had a 1% forward, or you go back to who were we on earlier? It was like 3% that Anil had for the quarterback that actually ended up winning the tournament for him. And I think a lot of people have said, like even myself has said it in golf, at least with the plays that are above 7K, I think, and it goes to football with anything. With football, I'm going to let them trickle in because it's a running back that could just be that one difference maker that makes the lineup. But in golf, it's like if you're going to take a stand, if you're going to go to a guy in the 6K range, I will always say, like, let's get 5 or 10% so that if you're right, they're mixed in. It's an individual sport, though. So I think I still stand by that. But when I was only getting like 2% or 3% of a Max Homa because I was getting so many guys around him that were just as good or better, that I just like those plays better, that one Max Homa could flip into the rest of my core. And we've seen it here now going back to NFL, where those one little trickle off quarterbacks of 3% to 5%, or only having 7 or 8% of James Cook, you could just cross them off and say, I'm not getting enough, so why not? But if they trickle into the right places, those are these 40-point differences and 30-point differences that can separate yourself from not making any money to literally winning the tournament and moving on. And it's not really being like situational or sample size or results oriented. Just I've been watching it all season. It does make sense to me where you can find these spots, plug them in, and still make them work, especially in NFL. But in golf, I'm talking more with mid-tier and above, not the scrubs. I think you should still kind of find some scrubs that you like, because otherwise you can get yourself playing too many of them and you put yourself in the situation of now you didn't have enough of any of them to find its way in. But for the players up top, I think I'm going to let more of those guys seep in. Any final thoughts from you, Nades, before we get out of here? It's been a great season doing this show with you, and always love breaking this stuff down in general.
No, it's been a great season. We appreciate it as everyone that tunes in, everyone who watches on playback. Obviously, we know at SHIPIT Nation here, this isn't the most viewed show, but that's not what we're about. We're about helping the people who want to learn, the people who want to become better players. Obviously, I paid attention to the show in the past, right? And when Tambo was a member of previous sites, things like that. I've loved this show. That's why when he asked if I wanted to do it with him this year, obviously I said yes. It'll be back next year. We appreciate everyone. And as always, just because we're not doing the show to the rest of the season, I still highly suggest y'all do this on your Monday during this time slot, whatever. Go on Fantasy Labs, go on the DraftKings leaderboards, and look at these different players, look at their constructions, and look at what you did, right? Maybe you were in line and maybe you had a good day, or maybe you didn't, right? What could you did better? Things like that. Just because we're not on here doing these shows doesn't mean you can't continue to do this process, because I know I'm going to continue to do it. I know Tam will continue to do it. That's how you become better players.
And don't forget about it. Like, you can always pencil it in somewhere else. The next couple of, like, for example, Christmas Day, a lot of stuff with family, but also a lot of DFS. We're going to have you covered at SHIPIT Nation, but there's going to be NBA slates, NFL slates, lots of shows that we're going to record in advance to make sure you guys are set up. Then, of course, all the content over on the site. If you guys want to get in on the action, like I said, the code that's still in the running here, you can use code MAYO, gets you 10% off any plan. And if you do it for the first month, it's like $2 a day. It works out to, it gets you all the stuff that we offer on our site, gets you a price cheap enough that you can still afford any optimizer that you want. If you are going to use an optimizer, we recommend the Solver. That's our partnership, but that'll get you guys into the mix where you can use it for all of that. Again, thanks to everybody out there for watching. We appreciate you all. Hit me up if you guys have any questions. Twitter at ToeTagginTambo. You can find me there. We're 100 subscribers away on this very channel. So if on the way out from giving away an annual membership, if on the way out, you can just hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. There's all free content throughout all the other sports, lots more to come, even today alone. And then we'll be back today at 2 p.m. Eastern, Hoop, Title, and myself breaking down Philly in Seattle for this game tonight. We've got some injury stuff to keep an eye on. I think it looks like it's going to be Drew Lock. Hopefully we see Hurts to keep it so it's still a pretty good game. But if not, I still have a lot more interest in tonight's game either way. So it's going to be a good one. Thank you guys so much for watching. For Nades, for myself, ToeTagginTambo, let's ship it.